morning. Hi, how great was Diane van Furstenberg? Oh my God. Oh my God. Anyhow, I'm still blown away, so forgive me, I'm a little starstruck. But anyway, I'm Lucinda. So as Lisa mentioned, I joined Walmart about a year ago as VP of Discovery and Personalization for product. What on earth does that mean? Still asking myself, but I like to say it means it's my job and my team's job to make it easier and faster for you to give us your money. Before Walmart, I ran product at Sephora. I've done product. I ran mobile at Lonely Planet. I've been at Gap, Yahoo. I was in consulting for many years doing product before I even knew what it was. So in other words, I've got about almost 25 years of experience in product, and so I've been around a few blocks. So what I thought I'd talk about today is what I think of as modern product management and how product management has evolved. So we're going to talk a little bit about the what, and we're going to talk a little bit about the how. But overall, I'm going to try and do 25 years distilled into 12 minutes or so or less. You game? Buckle up. So first of all, what is product management? Who here gets asked this question by their parents and neighbors, grandparents? Who here gets asked this by their CEO? Their new boss? Oh yeah. Is there another name for it? No, there's not. What is product management? And so the fact is, I think it really is different depending on where you are. Oftentimes, whether you're building a technology platform or a cybersecurity device or a customer experience, the fact is product management can be very different at different places. And yet there's a lot of threads that are in fact very much the same. So that's what I'm going to try and talk about today, is where I see a lot of the same threads and give you some tips on how to do it. So first of all, let's define product management. Product management, my definition of product management, is that it is at the intersection of business and technology, defining, designing, and delivering digital experiences that solve customer needs and drive business impact. Now, we could spend all 20 minutes on a VH1 pop-up video on this sentence alone. I swear to God I have. But let's talk instead about, both specifically, there's 4 key things that I expect product managers on my team to be able to do and to do consistently. Number 1, what should we do? Not what could we do, not what the CEO said to do or what your buddy said to do. What should we do? When you balance cost versus time versus benefit, what should we do? And not just, okay, it's incrementally better, but this versus the opportunity cost of other things. What should we go out and do? But number 2, why? It's not enough to have a great idea. You got to know why. And in fact, if a great idea falls in the woods and nobody hears about it and nobody understands it, it's not going to get delivered. So the third thing you need to be able to do is, once you know the what and you know the why, then you have to go out and communicate and align all those diverse stakeholders, all your business partners, all your tech partners, all your design partners, all your, look at your market research, your customers. Now you got to go out and actually communicate and, most importantly, align everybody on here's what we should go do. And then the fourth thing you do is deliver. And the funny thing is, if you look at a Gantt chart or a roadmap, everybody talks about the delivery time. And that's like 80% of the duration. But in reality, the 20% up front is in fact the 80% of the value of what we do as product management to make sure not that just we build something, but that we build the right thing. I tell my team all the time, I'm like, don't tell me you got in the car and drove this month. Tell me, are you driving to Seattle or are you driving to New York? And then we can figure out whether you're driving the right direction. On a good day, God, I love product management. I love this role. You feel like the unicorn on this magical bridge between business and tech and like solving customer needs, and you're like, I am magical. It's so amazing on those good days because you're in the middle of the thick of everything. You're working on some of the coolest, most interesting, innovative things you possibly could. On a bad day, it's a lot more like Han Solo in the trash compactor. You're betwixt and between, and like business is yelling at you, and tech is yelling at you, and there's like monsters swirling around in the sludge, and you're like, oh my God. And your job is, in fact, to figure out how do you stave off getting crushed and rescue the princess and get everybody back on side. But how do you make sure that you find more good days than bad days? Because, it's a tricky balance sometimes. Well, first and foremost, so much of what we do is around expectation management. Has anybody in here ever been asked to change the time-space continuum in order to deliver a project that was impossible? Anyone? Yeah, hello, I have. And so the fact is, we have to be able to manage those expectations. And a roadmap, because of Agile, here's the thing, I love Agile. I I'm a huge agile believer. Whether it's fragile, faux agile, or whether it's true agile, the fact is, what agile is great at is delivering when you don't know what you're doing. What it is terrible at is predicting when you're going to deliver it. So every time somebody wants a roadmap and they want to know, so when am I going to get that awesome thing? You're always like, I mean, sort of around here, I guess, I don't know. And so I will tell you a story. When I was at Sephora, one of my favorite business partners, I love this woman, she's so awesome. But we got into it one day because she's like, you never commit. You never tell me we're absolutely going to do that and when you're going to do it. And I'm like, because I don't want to commit and then not be able to do it. And I'm like, I don't have certainty. And she looks at me and she goes, you sound like a lawyer. And I was like, I don't think that's a compliment, in this case at least. I have a lot of good friends who are lawyers, but anyway. But what we realized was because I was just saying, I can't commit yet. And in reality, what we needed to talk about was, are you 80% certain? Are you 60% certain? Are you 40% certain? Because at 80%, go start doing a marketing ad buy. At 60%, maybe not so much. And so how do you talk about that roadmap and manage expectations so that people have visibility into what you know, what you're certain of, and what you're not certain of? But ultimately, more often than not, how we do things as product managers is at least as important, if not more important, than what we deliver. If you find yourself, you've delivered some amazing product, and you look behind you, and you see bodies littering the field, you have won the battle but lost the war. Because product management, so much of it is about bringing others along for the ride with you. And so let's talk more about how you do that in a way that's going to set you up for success. Death to racy. Who here hates racy charts? I hate racy charts. Every time I mean, what is the R versus the A? Anyway, jiminy crickets. So racy charts, every time in my career that I've had to do a racy chart with teams, whether it was with design and product and business, or product and tech, it ends up like Game of Thrones. Somebody's storming Casterly Rock and somebody's trying to take the Iron Throne, and you're like, no, come on, people. Because at the end of the day, we do not live in a simple world anymore. If there's more than 5 people in your company, there's no such thing as I own something and I get to do everything for it myself, right? I mean, who gets to make every decision themselves? So if you think about it and say, actually, there's all this overlap in all of these roles. And I could spend all day arguing over the Gaza Strip of like, whether or not you get to do this or I get to do that. Or I could look at it and say, hey, the beauty of this is in that overlap. And when we bring people together to collaborate on those things, and as long as you're clear and say, this is what you have to do, this is what I have to do, I have to drive the delivery of these things in the middle, but we are going to do that together. And we are going to come together because that diversity of perspective and diversity of thought is what makes for an awesome product at the end of the day. This is one of my favorite pieces of advice that I was given when I first became a VP. I got the title, and I was like Galadriel in Lord of the Rings. I was like, one dark queen to rule them all! You know, I was like, I'm gonna fix everything, right? And not so much. That may not have worked so well. Because the fact is, no matter what your title, whether you're owning or whether you're on the hook for something, people don't want to do things that they don't want to do if they don't want to do them for you. And so how do you figure out whether you have authority or not? So much of true authority is built on influence. And influence is built on building genuine relationships of trust, where you deliver what you say you're going to deliver, but also where you listen. The irony in this is the more you listen and the less you talk, the more you have influence when you do speak. Sort of like that Hamilton song, right? Talk less, smile more. It's true. But ultimately, I think I'm cribbing this out of Radical Candor, off of Steve Jobs, but it really struck me, it's so much more important to get it right than it is to be right. When you find yourself married to your solution instead of married to the problem, then you've stopped taking in new data from other sources. And the only way that that Venn diagram overlap works is when you look at it and say, we are more powerful together when we bring these different perspectives together, and that we are going to get it right together. Who here expects that somebody else who's a product manager is going to have all the answers themselves with no help? And yet, how often do you feel that yourself? Like, oh my God, I better come up with an answer. It is about getting it right, not about having to be right. And by the way, if you joined product management because you're super excited to go tell everybody else what to do, that's going to be a problem. This is one that I've come up with, and I trot it out all the time. There's a million ways to say the same thing. They do not all get the same result. When you're in an emotionally charged situation where you disagree with somebody or you need to give them hard feedback, the fact is, if you're emotionally charged too, you're going to say some crazy shit. That's just how it is. And it is not going to be heard. Because when somebody's emotion is running high, their logic is running low. And so when you're about to have a tricky conversation where you know you need to bring people to alignment, or you need to find balance, or you need to provide hard feedback, you need to make sure that you put yourself in a place where you can actually frame it in a way that they're going to hear it. Not just that you say what you want to say, but that they are actually going to hear it. There's a great Brené Brown, Dare to Lead. Anyone? I love that book. But she talks about you're not ready to give feedback until you're ready to sit on the same side of the table as the person to whom you're giving feedback. And I think about this all the time in product management. When you need to give tricky feedback or when you need to have a tricky conversation, you need to come to it by being on the same side of the table. Okay, but how do you do that? Because here's the thing. I believe people are inherently reasonable. Is there anybody in here who thinks they're inherently unreasonable? Anyone? Anyone? Oh, good, nobody, okay. Is there anybody in here who, showing a little vulnerability, will admit that on occasion they may have acted unreasonably? Yeah, see, sometimes we all act a little unreasonable. But the fact is, chances are, when that happens, it's because you know something that somebody else doesn't, or they know something that you don't. So when you find yourself at odds and on the wrong side of the table from the person where you need to figure things out with and figure out how to align, ask yourself, if they're acting unreasonably, what is it that they know that I don't? And how am I going to ask the questions to figure out what that is in a way that they will actually share it with me, and vice versa, and show some vulnerability and say, hey, I must be missing something here. How do we figure out what it is? Like, because clearly this is not working for you. What is it that's different? And try to take it down a notch, but really start with the assumption that they are, in fact, reasonable people. Because the moment you're like, that partner would be cray, you've lost the battle, right? Because you're no longer assuming that they're a reasonable, rational person, which I fundamentally believe people are. I mean, there's rare exceptions, but really rare, really, really rare. I believe, and Jimena talked about this, I believe everyone has a hero power. But hero powers are tricky. The thing that is your hero power is often the thing that you take most for granted, that you assume is easy for everybody else because it's easy for you. Like, that is the definition. It's that thing that is easy for you that you assume everybody else can do, and then they look at you like you're crazy. For me, one of the things I realized was one of my hero powers is analogies. For better or worse, sometimes they're crazy. But ultimately, I can see patterns very quickly, and I can very rapidly summarize them in an analogy for people who don't necessarily know all the underlying bits. It took me years to figure out that that was something that not everybody could do, or be able to communicate those things effectively and quickly. I believe that in your 20s, you become who you are. In your 30s, you start to understand it. And when I hit my 40s, I thought I was going to go fix it, and then I was like, I'm leaning in. Fuck all y'all. This is what I got, right? Like, pardon the French. But now, as you know your hero power, you can lean into it, and you're like, oh. And it's weird. Like, analogies, that's weird. That's not on any strength chart, right? It's not on strength finders. I checked. But figuring out what is it that you do really well is really important. So ask your friends, because it is the other people who can see you so much more clearly than you often can see yourself. Because like I said, it comes so easily, right? It's so natural. It's not a big deal. Ask others. Now, back to my point about unreasonableness. It is also a great way to change the dynamic when you're working with somebody who you can't stand. I had this engineering partner once, maybe twice, and oh my God, one of my hero powers is time management. I'm like, I could tell that is not gonna get done there, and I know that's not gonna get done, so let's just all admit it and move on. And he would just be like, no, I can do it. And I mean, little ashamed, a little vulnerable to admit, it was a little ugly for a few months. Because I kept thinking he had a hero power of time management, which he most definitively did not. And he thought that that meant I didn't trust him, which it did. And we'd just get into these snarky matches. And frankly, and he would also sit there and he would say things that, for all intents and purposes, were, don't worry your pretty little head. So needless to say, I was triggered emotionally in a lot of these conversations. But the way I fixed it was I was like, oh, I got to stop wishing for a different VP. I got to deal with this one. And so I sat down and I said, well, here's the thing. Everybody has a hero power. What is his hero power? And I watched and I looked and I figured out, you put him in a room with like 5 engineers, he was amazing. From a technical solutioning perspective, he was amazing. And when I sat with him and I said, hey, you know, I've noticed this is your hero power and you're amazing at it. And by the way, I do not have that and I have so much respect for it. Completely changed the entire dynamic of our relationship. Because then we could build on that and I could say, by the way, I've also noticed I have this hero power and you don't. So how do we get on the same side of the table and work together to work with our hero powers? Okay, so this one's a little trite, I admit. Everybody talks about feedback as a gift. It really is, I'm not kidding. Again, the only way you get to your 40s to really know and lean in is to actually ask for feedback from other people. That's how you figure out your hero powers. But actually in this case, I want to talk about from a product management perspective. The other day I was at Walmart, I was in a meeting of a couple hundred VP officers with our CEO, Doug McMillan. And he took a moment to remind VP officers that if you walk into his office with a 35-page PowerPoint deck, and your goal is to get to the end of it without him saying anything, you have missed the boat. So both on a personal level, you should be asking for feedback, but also when we talk about getting it right, every time you walk into those types of design reviews, Amir's going to talk about that in a moment, but every time you walk into those discussions with other people and other stakeholders, always go into it looking for at least one thing you can learn from that conversation that you didn't know going in. What is that one piece of feedback that you may have missed? Because none of us are perfect. No matter how much we're all recovering perfectionists, none of us are perfect. So how do you look for that gem of feedback that you can get in those conversations? And that's, again, how you continue to make sure that you get it right by keeping that open mind instead of being married to that solution and believing you have all the answers. Do not negotiate against yourself. We are all socialized as women to be all nice, wait for somebody to discover us, wait for somebody to figure it out for us, see what's happening, hi. Yeah, no. Do not negotiate against yourself. Whether it is asking for what you deserve, Elizabeth talked about that this morning in terms of your value, as well as whether it's what you need for your initiative, for your product to be launched correctly, ask. You will not always get what you ask for, but I guarantee that you will always start an important conversation that will lead to something better than if you just sat and stayed silent. So this is something where when you see things that are going, see something, say something, right? You see something going awry, you need to take that moment and actually ask and not assume that you can't have what it is that you know because you're closest to it, that you know is what's important and is needed. And then last, because I'm running out of time, but my last point is this. We are they. There's always been this they. They're going to fix it, or they caused all the problems. But here's the thing. We are they. We are in such a powerful role. Product management, we are in every conversation. We are talking to business, we're talking to tech, we're talking to everybody. We have the opportunity to set the tone of every conversation we're in. We can choose to be positive, or we can choose to be bitchy. We can choose to be proactive, or we can choose to let somebody else take it. We can choose to be problem solvers, or we can choose to place blame and look behind us. We are they. It is our choice in every conversation we're in to change the culture of our organization, of the industry, and help all of our sisters as we go through this. But understand, there is no they. We shouldn't be thinking about a they anymore. We have that power. Look at us here together. Look at us. This is amazing. So we are they. I'm going to now turn it back over to Lisa, who's going to turn it to Mira. Thank you.